Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Welcome. I'm the president, Lenny Mercier, of the Northside Improvement Association. We've been a group.
The mic
Oh, I'm
doesn't.
sorry, volunteer group. I'm not used to using one of these things. I have a loud voice, so I just talk. Anyhow, we've been around since 1912. We are the oldest community-run improvement organization in Riverside. We also meet on every second Monday of the month down at the Ruth Lewis Center. So if anybody wants to come down and be part of helping to improve this side of town, everybody's more than welcome. All right. I think that's about it for me. Pete, I'm ready.
All right.
You're ready. I'm going to turn it over to Pete, and he's going to take care of you guys.
Well, I'm going to do my best here. So, I'm Pete Wogemuth. I'm the Northside liaison to the Ward 1 Neighborhood United group that is sponsoring these candidate forums, and thank you all for coming. First, we need to welcome our candidates as you see them from your left to right. We have Aaron Edwards, Philip Falcone, and Mike Gardner. So let's give a big hand for them. Yay! And they'll be answering questions tonight from the Northside residents primarily. So if you have not yet submitted your questions, as you had the opportunity to do so online, we have blank index cards and pens for people that if you want to submit a question, raise your hand at this time and we will get you an index card. When you're done with your index card, raise your hand again, we'll come and collect it, and we'll see that it eventually gets to the moderator, who I'll introduce momentarily. So, Election Day is June the 4th, first Tuesday in June. It's an all mail-in ballot this year, so you cannot go to your polling place. You have to either mail in your ballot prior to Election Day, or on Election Day itself, you have to go find a ballot that's open, a ballot box, and submit it at that time, at that place. There's always the County Register of Voters, which is over on Gateway in Moreno Valley. The election has one difference this year, and that is in order to comply with new state law, municipal elections are supposed to be consolidated to a statewide primary. So that means in order to accommodate this adjustment, the election that we're having for Ward 1 Council this year is going to be for a term of 5 years, not 4, in order to get the dates to all align, kind of like cosmic convergence here. All right, so just before the forum, the candidates drew numbers for the speaking order, and you can see that is as they were seated there and as we introduced them. So the idea is that the first candidate will make an opening statement, then the next, then the next. Then as the questions are asked by the moderator, we will rotate to the various candidates so everybody gets a chance to be first or middle or last in the questions. That's pretty much it. We're going to go till 8 o'clock today. So if for some reason your question doesn't get answered, the candidates will still be here till 8:30. You can go personally ask your question to the various candidates at that time, if in the event your question didn't get asked specifically. All right, I think that's pretty much all I have to say, except we want to introduce our moderator, Tom Hunt, a longtime Riversider. He's a longtime school board member. He owns his own public relations firm downtown. He's a kind of a mover and a shaker within the city, and we're very happy and that he graciously consented, with a little arm twisting from Ron Loveridge, to moderate our event tonight. So without any further ado, Tom, please take it away.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you. Thank you. It's very kind of you. And thank you. I am Tom Hunt. I'm a Ward 3 resident, and I want to commend you in Ward 1 for how active you are in your selection of who will represent you. Certainly most of us, even in Ward 3, think that Ward 1 is the heart and where we're going as a city. So I'm very glad to be here. Candidates, I'm going to go over quickly just some of the formats for you and our audience. Each of you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. You will each have 90 seconds to answer the questions. I have 7 questions that have been prepared, and then 90 seconds from any of the audience questions that come forward. You'll finish up with a 1-minute closing statement. I want to introduce my timekeeper, Martin, who's very strict. As you can see, that's 30, and you better stop. And just a couple of ground rules. Candidates, don't feel pressured to use all the time allotted for each question. When you're satisfied with your answer, we're happy to move on. Just let me know. As we said, we'll stop you if you run over. We ask you, the audience, to hold your applause, to keep things equitable. And until the end of the forum, we want to give as much time up to that 8 o'clock for the questions you came here for. And we will begin with opening statements. And at the end of them, at the end of the opening statements, I'm going to give one last call to the audience for any questions that you may want to submit. Who are they submitting them to, Pete?
The runner's gonna come.
Runners right here, so you want to raise them up, all right?
Does anybody need any more index cards?
All right, we're good. So I'm going to begin now. We're going to begin now with opening statements, starting with Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner?
How long, sorry?
I'm sorry?
How long, 12?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 2 minutes. I'm sorry, is there another?
And it's gonna start with Aaron Edwards.
Oh, I apologize, I went from this wrong. Pardon, Ms. Edwards, I apologize to you. I'll have to switch my numbers. Okay, if I mess that up again, anybody out there, Vicki, you be sure to help me know if I'm going the wrong way. So, again, we start. Ms. Edwards.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. I am a member of the Northside Improvement Association and the Stop the Warehouse Committee of the Springbrook Heritage Alliance. I have volunteered to read to students at Beatty School and also Fremont, where my own daughter will attend one day. My family plays in Reed Park. I'm running for city council because Riverside is my home. I want Riverside to be the best possible home it can be for all of us, a place where everyone can thrive. My background is in the nonprofit sector. Over a decade of experience addressing complex issues like homelessness, one of the biggest issues that our city faces. I spoke to a Northside neighbor whose own brothers are homeless in our city, struggling to afford rent and to access health care. I am committed to addressing this issue while on city council. This is my background and my expertise. I will also invest in neighborhoods. Everyone should feel secure and connected where they live. I met a 90-year-old woman on the north side who used to host a block party on her lawn that the entire neighborhood would attend, including the mayor. She, like many Northsiders, has lived in her home for over 30 years. That is investing in a neighborhood. But as a city, we have a long way to go. I also hear neighbors who want sidewalks on both sides of the street, smarter locations for crosswalks, safe routes to school, truck routes that don't rattle windows or shake foundations. On City Council, I will work with my fellow council members to put Riverside on the map and to do it in a way that makes sense for the people who live, work, and play here, and in a way that sees residents as experts and as assets. I am a fresh voice with the experience to lead our city through the challenges and the opportunities ahead, and I look forward to your questions this evening.
Thank you. Let's hold the applause. Mr. Falcone, thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking our hosts this evening and thank you all for attending and participating. We are here tonight in Riverside's oldest, most historic neighborhood, a neighborhood that reflects some of Ward 1's most poignant challenges that call out why the Riverside City Council is in need of profound change. 14 years ago, though, I wouldn't have imagined myself sitting here before you. My family arrived to Riverside after Hurricane Katrina. We had only 5 days worth of clothing in our suitcases, and the generosity of this community got us back up on our feet and offered new opportunities. Those included me serving as a city commissioner, having the opportunity to work for Mayor Bailey, experiencing firsthand how our city operates. For this, I am deeply grateful to this community. This gratitude leads me to want to give back by serving you on the Riverside City Council. Riverside is my passion, and I recognize it faces significant 21st century challenges that require fresh, innovative thinking. My vision for the Riverside of the future focuses on the big picture, ending cycles of short-sightedness and short-sighted decisions. I envision modernized infrastructure to sustain neighborhoods for future generations. I envision responsible development, bringing high-quality jobs while preserving our area's unique character and history. I envision residents enjoying a high quality of life, engaged in this community with a sense of security and comfort. We will accomplish this by investing in the North Side's roads and sidewalks to ensure residents have safe, well-maintained routes to work and school, preserving and protecting the oldest structure in our area, and building consensus on community planning decisions that are open, transparent, and reflect the best interest of the residents. I know I'm not alone in this vision. Together, with fresh thinking, we can make it all a reality. I look forward to your questions this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Now we go to Mr. Gardner.
Well, I too would like to thank all of you for, joining us this evening. Northside Improvement Association and Dana for putting together this set of forums. I think it is really important that all of you have an opportunity to see and listen to the candidates so you get a feel for people's positions and their experience, what they know, what they are able to accomplish. Riverside is at a critical point in its history. We face a significant financial hurdle as we take on the pension funding challenge that faces all of local government and the state as well. Our city has come a long way, but we have a long way to go. We must tackle homelessness, update our general plan, and complete the Northside specific plan. We need to fix, our housing element is not up to par. We need to fix that and provide housing for all of our residents, from the wealthiest to the most desperately poor, from young people just starting out to our senior citizens. We must maintain a balanced budget and adequate reserves while continuing to fund critical public services like public safety, parks, street improvements, and tree trimming. Riverside needs to focus on attracting smart development that brings quality jobs with good benefits while being respectful of our land, air, and water. We need to cut commutes by bringing jobs here and offer good employment opportunities to the young people graduating from our local schools. I devote my full time to being your council member, as I believe the job demands and you deserve. I'm generally recognized as a voice of reason and a calming force on the City Council. Knowing that we will have 3 new council members in Wards 3, 5, and 7, I believe that my proven leadership, knowledge, and experience are particularly important to guiding our city through the coming years.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Thank you, candidates. Is there any other, this last call for questions? Anybody have any for fill-in? All right, we're going to move on then. Ms. Edwards, the first question is for candidates. I'm sorry. Oh,
The first question.
we are? Okay.
Yes.
2.5 minutes or 2 minutes?
It is actually 90 seconds, sir. 1.5 minutes. I apologize, Mr. Falcone. The Trujillo Adobe is a registered historical landmark in the county of Riverside. However, past inaction by the county has sadly nearly destroyed the building. Currently, preservation efforts along with fundraising have been undertaken by the Spanish Town Heritage Foundation and the descendants of the Trujillo family. Question: what can the city of Riverside do to help with the restoration effort, and do you recommend a course of action?
In my opening statement, I had mentioned the importance of preserving the uniqueness of the North Side, and I had mentioned the importance of preserving the oldest structure in our area, which is the Trujillo Adobe. I serve on the Cultural Heritage Board for the City of Riverside, and historic preservation is my area of expertise. I think that when it comes to the Trujillo Adobe, no matter how we got to this point now, we have to look at how we continue to go forward and how we ensure that moving forward that we protect this vital structure that tells the uniqueness that is our story. I think what it's going to take will be more comprehensive working in partnerships with the City of Riverside and the county agencies. We're fortunate that many of the former city employees that were tasked with some various historic preservation efforts from a city standpoint have now progressed onto the county, and there's definitely pathways that exist for partnership in that regard. regard. I think that we have allowed too much of the burden to be carried by the Spanish Town Heritage Foundation, and we need to be working more comprehensively with them to ensure that we more accurately tell our story. The Trujillo Adobe is a unique window into looking into both Riverside's past, but in particular, the Northside's past. And I believe it is our obligation to uphold that and to ensure that that restoration comes to fruition.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Now on to Mr. Gardner for the same question. Would you like me to read it again, Mr. Gardner?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Riverside, I think, can play an important role in helping to preserve and long-term maintain the Trujillo Adobe. There are several keys to that. One is to not approve a warehouse just on the block from it. I significantly opposed that. I did not prevail with the remainder of the council. That warehouse is now in litigation. And I believe that the argument that I made that the warehouse is not consistent with the general plan will stand up in court, and that the court will ultimately overturn the decision of the council. We are, as you all know, in the middle of preparing the Northside specific plan. That's a key to the future, not just of the Trujillo Adobe, but the Northside as a whole. If we do the Northside specific plan correctly, we will adopt a plan that encourages development that is consistent with preservation of and enjoyment of the Trujillo Adobe. Some residential, some light commercial and retail, the kinds of things that would allow the vision of the Spanish Town Heritage Foundation to come true. If we authorize warehouses there, that vision will not happen. So I think Riverside can play a key role there. I think Riverside can also help with some funding.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
We know that every $1 that's invested in cultural heritage brings $26 back to a community. What a return on investment. But in order to get there, it will take some political will. We cannot just let the nonprofits do all of the heavy lifting on this and other heritage and cultural landmarks in our city. In terms of a course of action, I believe that Trujillo Adobe is very important to our city, that we need to take steps to preserve it, and that it can be and is a regional tourism draw. And to get there, we'll need to work with the Trujillo family, the Spanish Town Heritage Foundation, and think about how to create a heritage circuit, not just how to promote this one important place in Riverside, but how to use it to highlight other important places in Riverside. How can we draw tourists here? And as a part of visiting the Trujillo Adobe, you're also encouraged to see Citrus State Park, to see the Harada House, and there we're enriching our whole city across all wards.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner, the next question will begin with you. An idea has been floated to relocate and rebuild the Trujillo Adobe in White Park in downtown Riverside. Do you support this concept, and is there another alternative?
There are numerous other alternatives. The best one is leave it right where it is and restore it and maintain it there. There are several reasons it should not go to White Park. First, you can't just pick up and move an adobe. You could reconstruct something that would look like the adobe looked like in White Park or somewhere else, but you lose the contextual value that is so important. The adobe is where it is because that's where the first non-Native American settlers to our area settled. And it's about all that's left, that and the Agua Mansa Cemetery. Most everything else has washed away or been taken down over the years. We need to keep it exactly where it is. There's another reason not to put it in White Park or anything else in White Park. White Park was designed as a botanic park. It is not a visitor center for historic things, moved or otherwise. If you were to try to move it or recreate it somewhere else, White Park would not be the place. But again, moving or recreating the adobe is a bad idea, and we should keep it right where it is.
Ms. Edwards.
I would not support moving the Trujillo Adobe to White Park or moving it anywhere. A sense of place is extremely important, and when you speak to the family and the organization that has been working tirelessly to support this landmark, they will tell you that they do not want to see it moved. And I believe as a city council member, it's important to listen to the people who've been working the hardest to save and protect these landmarks and to take their advice into the highest regard when making those decisions.
Mr. Falcone?
I believe many of us, and from the faces I know I've seen, have heard the silliness in that question. And this is exactly what happens when we have a city council that is not equipped with the knowledge of historic preservation and not equipped with the knowledge of how to maintain and restore historic properties. The idea of moving an adobe should be bring at least a smirk to your face alone because of the sheer fact that it is made of adobe and made of dirt. I think that what I would be in favor of is keeping the adobe exactly where it is and working more comprehensively with the various organizations and jurisdictions to bring about the restoration of that structure instead of moving it. We have to also understand that when we talk about historic structures, simply moving a structure somewhere does not, there's more to the story than just the structure itself. The place in which it is located has value as well. And so moving the adobe would not only be, from a technical standpoint, impossible, but also would really sever a part of our important history. So I think that no, I would not be in support of that, and I also can confidently say that that would not pass the Cultural Heritage Board and would not be something that I know many of those that are working to preserve the city from a historical standpoint would not be in favor of.
Thank you, candidates. The third question, we'll start with Ms. Edwards. There are many amenities lacking in the North Side neighborhood that the rest of the city takes for granted. These include a full-service grocery store, department store, a medical clinic, and others. What incentives can the city offer to prospective businesses to locate on the North Side?
The first thing that we need to think about when we look at amenities is the number of rooftops that we have to support those amenities. So our first goal and task as a council member will be to think about how we can have the rooftops here to support those amenities. It is devastating that we have now a community that doesn't have a grocery store. So we're not even talking about a grocery store you can walk to. We're talking about a grocery store. There are some smaller markets, for example, on North Main, which is closer to my home, sort of on the cusp of downtown and the North Side. There is a small market. I think North Main is an incredible opportunity to look at businesses that are there already, to ask them what their needs and desires are where they are located, to see how as a city we can support them in their dreams to expand and in the neighbors' dreams to see services. We need to be careful not to offer too many perks to businesses, but I do think that we can be more inspiring and we can be smarter with the way we tell our story as a city to make sure that businesses know that this is a place that they will want to relocate and a neighborhood that they will want to and that they will be proud to be in.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, would you like the question repeated or are you fine? All right, thank you. Yes.
Repeat, go ahead and repeat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Well,
Mr. Hunt.
I should look. There are many amenities lacking in the North Side neighborhood and that the rest of the city will take for granted. A full-service grocery store, a department store, a medical clinic, and others. Your question is, what incentives can the city offer to prospective businesses to locate on the North Side?
I think the important balance that must take place is balancing the incentive piece along with ensuring that the residents are both heard and listened to when it comes to both the land use as well as the planning processes of attracting various things to our North Side. A good example is this, and many of you are very familiar with the North Side specific plan that is taking place. As I've been active in the various planning meetings that have occurred, time and time again, residents of the North Side have mentioned that they do lack these amenities. A barber shop, a drugstore, things that are very important to their neighborhood that many other neighbors, as the question states, take for granted in various parts of the city. I think one of the ways that we go about addressing this, though, is that ensuring that when we attract various businesses to our city, all across our city, that they employ with quality jobs that then allow residents that are across our city or living in the north side specifically are able to have secure jobs that they can fall back on and rely on. And that then, through the free market that exists, allows businesses to come and develop in various neighborhoods for individuals that they know would be spending money in those various neighborhoods. So it's definitely a balance. Of course, we have seen in the past that some businesses do need some incentivizing to come to our city, but we have to do it in a way that's extremely responsible and careful, and not that we go too heavy-handed in one direction. I think that is what will be needing to occur to ensure that we have the various amenities that we would all like to see in this neighborhood.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Gardner, same question.
Thank you. I don't think you want to incentivize business from a financial perspective. You don't want to pay somebody to come here. In rare instances, you might create a tax break or a hotel, give back some of the transit occupancy tax. I don't think we need to do that on the north side. I think what the north side needs is a plan that actually works and zoning that is consistent with the planning side of your land use plans. We don't have that today. Our general plan and our zoning code for the north side are not the same. They argue for different things, and the warehouse is a great example of that. The zoning code allows a warehouse of up to 400,000 square feet as a matter of right, without even going to the planning commission, if it doesn't require any variances. The one over here on Center Street did not require any variances, and it was initially approved by the staff. It only got a planning commission and the council because that decision was appealed. So I think the proper thing to do is finish the north side specific plan, get the zoning, get the planning side to work together to allow for and encourage the kind of development you want to see and discourage the kind of development that you don't want to see. And that's the key. You don't need to spend more money to get business to come. We've got the space, we've got the need, we just need to get the government to work right to make it happen.
Thank you, candidates. Question 4 will begin with Mr. Falcone. Mr. Falcone, the city has spent 3 years and $2 million trying to craft a north side specific plan to mesh zoning and planning on the overlooked and often undervalued north side neighborhood, and it is still not complete. Meanwhile, the city council approved a 308,000 square foot warehouse on Center Street, leaving a 16-acre hole in the middle of this specific plan. How do you reconcile these apparently contradictory decisions, and what would you suggest to solve this dilemma?
I think what we first must realize is it is one thing for a council person to be one individual vote on various city council decisions, to vote in which their residents and constituents request that they do. But it's also vital to have consensus building on the city council. One vote does not mean anything if we cannot get the 4, or in some cases 5, to achieve something across the finish line. What happened in terms of the Northside specific plan and the warehouse was we had a city council, we currently have a city council that could not come to consensus on this item, despite the fact that a very large amount of both Northside and residents from all across the city came out in droves asking their city council to see this problem, this predicament from their point of view. And our city council unfortunately dismissed that. And that is one of the many reasons I had mentioned in opening statements that we need the profound change in our city council. I think what has happened, and even I know in the question it says 3 years of a Northside specific planning process, various members of the community that I've spoken to say feel that it has been longer than that. And it's an absolute disservice to the residents. It somewhat makes the residents feel that there has been a bait and switch mentality, that they were given this Northside specific plan, and it's been going through the process for a number of years, but have not seen any true, real fruition on that. And I think that is because of a lack of political will. If a council person wants to push something along, they have the ability to do so. Staffing and other levels of government that achieve this Northside specific plan answer both to city management as well as the council, and we need that political will.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner, same question.
Thank you. The warehouse vote was very disappointing to me. I think our council made a significant mistake, and I think we'll lose in court. There's this thing called the Brown Act, or the California Open Meeting Law, which says that a majority of a legislative body, like city council or a committee of the city council, cannot meet outside the public eye except in very rare circumstances. For me to have gone and worked the console in advance of the public meeting would have been illegal. I won't do that. You know, whether I like the rules or I don't like the rules, I follow the rules. And I think it's important that your elected officials do that and that they understand the rules. As far as the warehouse goes, yes, there is a big hole. If that warehouse is built, it will make it very difficult to develop anything other than other industrial around it. It sets the tone, and I believe it to be the wrong tone. I argued that. I will continue to argue it through the Northside Specific Plan process, and I hope that the council, especially with some new members, will have a better perspective of what the North Side can and should be, and won't be affected by some of the kind of blighted businesses that do exist on parts of the North Side, and see that as all that the North Side can be.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, you to finish up the question.
The Northside Specific Planning process in many ways has been a wonderful process that has taken into account community desires, needs, voices across several workshops. What disappoints me about this particular plan is, as the question mentioned, how long it has taken, how long it is taking to complete it. We must, and on City Council I will, continue to insist on these community-led processes, but also make sure we keep the fire in our belly so that the process keeps going and is completed in a timely manner. When we don't, that's how other decisions are made that can undermine the process and the decisions that the plan is trying to avoid. Another tragedy with this particular issue, the warehouse especially, is that the community who's against the warehouse has to put together their own dollars to stop it. This is a disappointing process that is the last recourse for a community. While I'm on City Council, I'll make sure that voices are listened to from the community early on in the process, that we keep planning processes moving swiftly, and also that we work across the region with other cities who are neighbors to ours. We saw what happened in Colton with the approval of their warehouse. It was one of the reasons that our council cited when they approved this one. If we were thinking more regionally and thinking about being better neighbors, that might not have happened.
Thank you very much. We're going to start now, Mr. Gardner, with you for the question number 5. The decision to approve the Center Street Warehouse project was made in the face of overwhelming Northside resident opposition. How do you balance the conflicting business interest and resident concerns in future Northside development proposals?
I think you have to follow the law as it exists at the time a project is brought forward. Once we have the Northside Specific Plan in place, it will be much clearer, and we won't have the conflict between the planning side, the general plan, which, by the way, talks about warehouses up to 10,000 square feet, not 300, 400. But for a project that is brought forward today, before we adopt the Northside Specific Plan, we have to follow the existing zoning code and the existing general plan. We are required to do that. I will continue to argue where I think the general plan is not consistent with the zoning, that we should follow the general plan, not the zoning. If you're going to not follow one side, pick the side that best serves the area. Yes, business interests are important to the city, jobs are important to the city, but I've never felt like warehousing is the best business or provides the best jobs in our city, and they're not stable jobs long term. Warehouse jobs are going to get automated fairly quickly. Yeah, you might make $17 an hour as a forklift operator now, and you only have to train a week to learn to be one. I am one, by the way. But that's going to go away. That's all going to automate.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards, same question.
On City Council, our job is to take all voices into account, to listen to residents, to listen to business owners, and to see the stories and the trends that we've heard to set not just policy, but brave policy that will reflect the direction we have for a neighborhood and for a city. We do our best to seek understanding, to build consensus if we can, to have a balance. All things that I have done in my various roles in the nonprofit sector, leading teams. For me, when I think back to the latest city council meeting about the warehouse issue, there was one thing that stuck out to me in particular. I did speak up against the warehouse at this meeting and others in public comment, and I noticed that after comment period was closed, when council was having their discussion, whenever they asked to speak to an expert, they never thought of community members as those experts, only people who came in suits. And what I commit when I'm on city council is to thinking of all of us who live here, who understand our issues best, who've lived in neighborhoods forever, who see things with fresh eyes, to think of all of us as experts when it comes to directions of a neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone?
To ensure that we have an open and transparent community planning process, I pledge that once on the city council, that while the completion of the Northside Specific Plan comes to fruition, that will be our strict tool of how we go about moving forward with both business and development in the North Side. This has been a process, while long, as we have mentioned previously, but has been a process nonetheless that has been very community oriented, and many community members have expressed what they wish to see in various neighborhoods. The example was that the warehouses is not something that the neighbors would like to see. Past warehouse decisions by our city council have been short-sighted because the warehouse jobs in many cases are not quality jobs, and the warehouses themselves consume valuable land in our north side. So what I propose is that we put forward a moratorium on warehouse development in our city until the completion of the Northside Specific Plan, if not later, depending on how both the community and the city council feel. We have had that in the past in the city of Riverside, and I think that is something that we need moving forward, that we as a community have vocalized no to warehouses, and that both the Northside Specific Plan portrays that, as well as the sentiments from the community. So I think one of the things I would be willing to do on the city council is propose that reinstatement of a moratorium on warehouses in our community.
Thank you. We're on to question 6. And Ms. Edwards, will begin with you. Much of the vacant land in Northside neighborhood is owned by the city and or the Riverside Public Utilities. The former golf course, Ab Brown Sports Complex, Pellicera Ranch. In fact, this underdeveloped land is the focus of the Northside Specific Plan. The city and Riverside Public Utilities has owned this land for decades. It has been suggested that this public land be sold at market to reduce the ratepayer burden and fund other city services. 2 questions. Do you consider selling this land for a one-time payout to be in the best interest of the Northside residents and RPU ratepayers? And secondly, is there another solution?
I do not see selling the land for a one-time payout to be a solution. I know that this is land that is precious, not just to the neighborhood, but to the entire city, and we need to be thoughtful about what happens with that land and have some ideas, some great ideas that have come from this community and that are being considered in the Northside Specific Plan. What's important to me is that whatever happens to that land, that whatever use is on it is a way that we're reinvesting or investing in this community to make sure it's something that residents are proud of and that they benefit from.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, same
Repeat
question.
the question.
Would you like me to go over that again? Much of the vacant land in Northside neighborhood is owned by the city and or the Riverside Public Utilities. The former golf course, the Ab Brown Sports Complex, Pellicera Ranch. In fact, this underdeveloped land is the focus of the Northside Specific Plan. The city RPU has owned this land for decades. It has been suggested that this public land be sold at a market value to reduce the ratepayer burden and fund other city services. The questions are, do you consider selling this land for a one-time payout to be in the best interest of Northside residents and RPU ratepayers? And is there another solution?
The reason I asked Mr. Hunt to repeat the question is that I think it is critically important that we acknowledge much of the land in the north side is owned by RPU. RPU land, if it were to be sold, and I would not be in favor of selling any land in the north side until our north side specific plan comes to completion. But RPU owned land that is then sold, the profits from that sale would then go into the RPU account versus the city's general fund. And many of our city burdens, financial burdens would have to come from the general fund. So those two funds are somewhat separate in that regard. And that is why I asked him to repeat the question, because it is important to understand that. I go back to the value of the Northside Specific Plan and the value of ensuring that community members' voices are heard and listened to when we create this plan. And what I pledge to do is build consensus on the city council in public session where it is perfectly legal and it is necessary of a city council person to build that consensus in the open session when many of us can join them and see what is being said. And that is one way that you can ensure that both the community needs and requests are heard and they transcend into our city council decision-making processes.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner?
Thank you. We need the land to create the amenities that the north side lacks and we all want to see here. You've got to have a place to put the grocery store, the medical clinic, the bank, the drugstore, all of those things. It does not have to be land that is sold. It could be land that is long-term ground leased. And if you do that, whichever body, whether it's a utility or general fund, has an ongoing revenue stream. If you sell it, you get not just the price that the land sells for, but it moves into private ownership, which puts it in the tax base. So the city would collect property tax revenue on both the land and whatever is developed on the land. The key to development, though, is the Northside Specific Plan, and you'll hear all of us keep mentioning that. We shouldn't do very much in the way of development on the north side in the area of the Northside Specific Plan until that is adopted. We need to get that in place. That will guide the vision for development on the north side. And then we can start making decisions on, do you sell some of it? Do you land lease some of it? How does it get used? We'd all like to see much of it kept in open space. An important thing on the utility side is they have a pension burden as well. So if they make some money, that will help there.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, you're going to start with the final question for us. Large diesel truck traffic is horrible on many north side ulterior corridors as trucks from Colton and beyond seek freeway access at Columbia Avenue and Center Street. These trucks pose a safety hazard, pound the infrastructure into submission, and impede the smooth flow of normal vehicles in their attempt to reach arguably the two worst on-ramps in the Inland Empire. What can be done to reduce this non-local truck traffic that is using the north side thoroughfares for extended freeway access?
This has been one of the single most critical responses I have heard from Northside residents as we're out talking to individuals, that the truck traffic is a burden that is just too much to bear for the residents. I think what is important, that first and foremost we need to acknowledge that there is something we can do when it comes to city developing, because any city development that requires large truck traffic will add more onto the street that is already overburdened. So that is important. When it comes to other cities like Colton or other places that are providing developments on their city-owned properties that provide more truck traffic on our road, I look to a decision that was just made 2 weeks ago by our city council that approved the use of various infrastructure needs from the city of Riverside to go to Colton to allow them to build additional warehouses and developments like that. That is something that we directly, as the city of Riverside, had a hand in adding more truck traffic onto the roads. I am very passionate about infrastructure. I think it's sometimes one of the things that many people oftentimes forget about or don't acknowledge as the important thing that it is. We have to ensure that our infrastructure is reliable and sustainable into the future. And the way that we do that is ensure that both the upkeep and the maintenance is critical, as well as the various vehicles, or in this case, large trucks, are using it. We can look at various things of enforcement, not allowing various trucks to go onto various roads. It would be difficult for Columbia and other main thoroughfares, but I think it can come back to, though, the development piece and ensuring that we are developing buildings that are responsible and not allowing Colton to do anything as well.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you. For about the last 2 years, the cities of Riverside, Colton, Rialto, Rupa Valley, and both Riverside and San Bernardino counties have been working together to try to develop what we are calling the Agua Mansa Corridor. That is a planned transportation route to deal with traffic that is generated by development in this part of the 2 counties and within those 4 cities. The basic plan is to try to take as much of it as possible out North Main in Riverside Avenue in between Colton and Rialto to Agua Mansa Road, then go across Agua Mansa Road to an improved Rubidoux Avenue freeway interchange to the 60 freeway in the city of Rupa Valley. Traffic that wants to go on the 10 freeway or north would proceed on Riverside Avenue up to the 10 and get on that freeway there. That's a promising alternative. It is a little bit contentious because no city is anxious to take the truck traffic that's generated in the city next to them. We're not anxious to have traffic from Rialto and Colton. They're not real anxious to have traffic from each other or from us. But I think this is a promising method.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards.
As I mentioned in my opening statement, I stood with a man at his home on the north side just this week, and we watched all of the trucks go by his street that didn't used to have trucks like that, and we watched the window rattle as the trucks went by, one after another after another. For me, this issue is about truck traffic. It's also about the air pollution that truck traffic brings. I can tell you as a mother, I know what it's like to sit with my toddler who's been diagnosed with pre-asthma to do a breathing treatment at 3 a.m. And just before I came here to this forum tonight, I got an air alert on my phone telling me that it was unhealthy for sensitive groups to be outside. So not only is it important to manage truck traffic because of the traffic itself in the neighborhoods, but also for the quality of our air, for the city, for the region. On City Council, I will review our truck routes. We know that trucks right now are going right through neighborhoods, even when we have axle restrictions saying that they can't. So for me, this means we need to think about how we can enforce those signs. Also ensure that we have sound infrastructure, so when we've created the truck routes, that the roads can withstand the trucks that are on them. And also think regionally about where trucks are going, why they're going there, and to make sure it's best for all neighbors and neighborhoods involved.
Thank you. That's the end of our questions that were prepared by the committee. We're going to go to the questions now from the audience. I believe, where was I? I'm sorry, the last one was you, right, Mr. Falcone?
Yes.
I believe I'm first.
Yes, sir, right. So, and remember, these are 90 seconds. You don't have to take the entire 90 seconds, but I'm sure you will. Would like to. I meant to say you would like to, excuse me. Anybody running for office doesn't take full 90 seconds, so you have to wonder. But some of these are short. So, Mr. Gardner, what is your views on the partnership with Goodwill?
Goodwill Industries, I assume?
I would assume it's the Goodwill, I don't know. Question here?
Okay,
Goodwill,
thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
It is a good partnership. There are several things that come from Goodwill that benefit a range of our population. They operate a large facility between Main and Orange at First Street, and it includes some housing. It previously had a school. It now is getting a health clinic, and there is a low-cost housing element of it. They work with the city to house people in need of housing, to provide some medical services. They do job training, and they do job placement. All good things, all important things to the success of our community, particularly those who are less well off.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards.
I would start by saying that partnerships are important. Cities alone cannot and should not provide all services. So looking to other organizations, to nonprofits, to other sectors to help support services we need in our city, that is a very important and a very good thing. What's important to me about this issue and any issues is to ask those who live close to Goodwill to make sure that this is working for them in their neighborhood, to hear any concerns that they have, and to address anything that might come up. And that is a way that I would approach this question about Goodwill and a question about anything in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Ms. Falcone.
The partnership that exists between the City of Riverside and Goodwill is one of the partnerships, or an example of a partnership, that I would be advocating for and continuing to push for on the City Council. The reason in that is because we oftentimes all across the city talk about the need for both affordable housing as well as job training and many of the opportunities that are offered through Goodwill. And what I often remind people of is, yes, affordable housing is vital, but also attainable housing, and housing for various individuals that maybe the specific parameters of affordable in this regard would not meet their need in a different regard. And Goodwill is an example of that, offering both affordable and attainable housing for the various residents that need it. So I think that is something that when we look at how are we moving forward as a city, vital partnerships like that will be important moving forward as we go into various areas where there will be greater need from the residents.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, we'll begin with you on a question I'm surprised hadn't come up yet. One of our audience members writes, I drove by a homeless shelter this afternoon and I counted 60 tents. What would you do on the council to help end homelessness here in Riverside?
Homelessness is one of the biggest issues that we are facing as a city, and my expertise is in addressing issues like homelessness. I managed a $7 million portfolio of health investments for United Way, including homeless shelters. I have helped to pilot programs in other cities for homeless youth and have seen models that I know can really work here. What's important to me in Riverside when we talk about addressing homelessness is that there isn't one solution, just as there isn't one particular scenario or kind of person that is experiencing homelessness or that leads to homelessness. So for me, it's, as I've been talking about it, putting our foot on 3 different gas pedals. The first is thinking about more emergency options, because we just do not have enough beds to meet the unsheltered need every single night. The second, we need good policy. And we're very lucky in Riverside because we have the best policy, gold standard, Housing First, to address this issue. Now we need real leadership to lean in on this model across the entire city. And third, we have to start thinking about homelessness prevention, because if we don't talk about how to have more affordable housing, if we don't talk about funding for mental health care, if we don't talk about food security for residents in their neighborhoods, we'll be looking at double, triple the number of people experiencing homelessness in a very short time.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone?
Homelessness is extremely complex, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and I believe it kind of goes without saying that, of course, the addition of shelter beds and emergency options are really the no-brainers of addressing some of the homeless issues. But that, however, is somewhat of a Band-Aid on a more underlying and more long-lasting problem that we have to tackle as a city. I think what's important is that we do have Housing First, and that is one solution of many different things that the city must be doing. I think what is most attainable at this point in time, and what is the greatest piece of need that we have in the city, is addressing those that are homeless, that are facing both mental illness as well as drug addiction and other things that have caused these underlying issues that I spoke of: job loss, the lack of affordable housing, and attainable housing. And I think one of the ways that we go about addressing that is looking to our various county partners. I have been in contact with and will continue to push for greater leverage with our various county agencies to ensure that we have the resources here in the city of Riverside for mental health care. We have, of course, a wonderful agency that's already in existence through the county mental health. We don't need to recreate the wheel. We need to have leaders that are at the forefront pushing for some of the most critical needs that we have in our community. And that's something that I'm prepared to fight for on the city council.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gardner?
Thank you. We do have a multi-pronged approach to dealing with the homeless issue. The Housing First program has been mentioned. It's been in operation for a little over a year. Between February of last year and February of this year, we housed permanent housing 117 formerly homeless individuals, and we are providing them at the location of their housing with the services that they require tailored to their needs. So substance abuse for those who need it, mental health for those who need it, job training for those who need it. It's a range, and it's tailored to each of those people. We currently have a caseload of 359 homeless people who are waiting to get into housing. The council some time ago voted to build out the homeless shelter on Hewlin Place in Ward 1. That will more than double the number of beds that we have to offer on a shelter basis. Shelter is intended to be very temporary. It's not a long-term solution for anyone. We also voted just this past Tuesday to add 28 mental health beds at the shelter. Those will be the first mental health beds operated by the city ever. We also, last Tuesday, voted to create something called public safety and engagement teams. These are teams that will be composed of police officers, code enforcement officers, homeless services personnel, and they will be out every day of the week.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Falcone, we're going to start with you on this next question, and we're going to, I reserve the right, by the way, up here to move these questions in an order and sometimes even edit them if I think they're a little one-sided. So take it up with me later if you'd like. All right? Not the candidates. And I live in Ward 3, so. The previous city manager changed some things about council meetings. The Sunshine Ordinance is great. What are your thoughts on the current practice of putting everything on the consent calendar to be rubber stamped and nothing of substance on the discussion calendar?
I think what's important, the consent calendar ultimately has become a piece of the city council agenda where many of the vast majority of the agenda items exist there, and the entire council goes around and says pass, 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 that there's no items they wish to be pulled for discussion, and then is voted in totality on those items. I think what's important, though, is that if you have a city council that truly values the sentiments and the comments of the residents, we have the ability to come down to the city council meeting, address our city council, and request that they pull one of the items, or reach out to them beforehand. And if you have a city council that understands and respects the value of being able for an individual resident to reach out and say, this, I would like you to pull this item, and this is the various reasons why, I think that is important. The Sunshine Ordinance is a great thing. It allows for the city council agenda really to be published well over the state standard of what is required, and allows all of us to do our due diligence and research various items before it gets to city council. So I think what is important is that we do look at, has the consent calendar worked in a way that has been effective for city government? And I think what is also important, that when we have a very meaty, a very lengthy consent calendar, but absolutely nothing on the discussion calendar, that is somewhat of a challenge, because you have a city government that is meant to be discussing various issues in the public eye, in open session, instead of having everything on the consent calendar.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gardner.
The consent calendar is designed to treat routine, repetitive kinds of actions and things that have been through a council committee, and there's a recommendation for the committee on how to proceed. Anything on the consent calendar can be removed to discussion calendar by the staff, by the city attorney, or by any council member. And I encourage people to ask for that when you see something that should come off. I rarely decline to pull something that somebody wants removed for discussion. We have a really good example of that on the agenda for tomorrow's city council. 2 city council members are recommending that we change the schedule of council meetings. We currently meet every week except for 2 summer months for the first 4 weeks of the month. The proposal that is on the consent calendar tomorrow is to go to meeting twice a month and drop meetings on a Tuesday following a Monday that's a holiday. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's something we absolutely have to talk about, and I don't think it should be pushed by council members who won't be here soon. And one of the people pushing it is not running for re-election. So that's one that I will pull on my own volition for discussion because I think we need to talk about that. And I think it's a bad idea.
Ms. Edwards.
For me, the biggest issue here is about communication. And when I think about the consent calendar, I think about, yes, these agendas are published far in advance, but is the information published and publicized in a way that is accessible for the average resident to understand and to be able to ask questions and know that they should ask for something to be pulled? We have to ask ourselves those questions. We have to ask ourselves what language the agendas is published in. Can everyone read and understand that language to be able to ask questions? And we have so many tools available to us now with social media and beyond to think about how, yes, if the agenda is published and it's on the city website, that's one thing, but how are we actually communicating this information to residents so they know to ask questions? How can we be even better utilizing neighborhood groups like this one to get that information out to make sure that we're asking the right questions? And that is something that I commit to doing on City Council.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner, do you support weekly or bi-weekly city council meetings? And Lynn's
Funny
not
you
allowed
should
to
ask
answer.
that. I think we should meet weekly for a variety of reasons. One thing is with the sunshine ordinance, it takes longer to get something on an agenda and before the council, significantly longer. It takes more than 30 days by the time the staff report gets written and reviewed and published. If we go to every other week, it's going to take that much longer to get something on an agenda. I also think it's very important that we, as your elected representatives, be up there in front of you, doing your business on a regular basis and be accessible. You can watch us on television. You can come down. You can stream it online, and people do all of those things. But I think it would be a serious mistake to go to every other week on a regular basis. The summer hiatus makes some sense. I'm not all that happy with it either, but I would not go beyond that.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
Well, I have been to many a city council meeting, and I think about how long some of these meetings are as it is, and I can't imagine how long they would be if we didn't have them every week. I think it's important that we have these weekly meetings because it gives us the time to have discussions that need to be had. It gives us the opportunity every single week for residents to come and share any concerns that may have come up. And so I am in support of keeping these meetings weekly and in continuing to have these discussions as often as we can.
Mr. Falcone, thank you.
I often talk to individuals about the current apathy that may exist towards residents and government right now in the society in which we live. And I think that when we have the proposal, in this case maybe, to shrink the number of city council meetings, it really diminishes the ability for individuals to come out and really engage with their government. And maybe once they get more familiarized with that, start to lose some of that apathy that currently exists in our society. I've been to every single city council meeting for the last 4 years as both someone working in City Hall, but then also just as a resident, as an individual. And there is so much valuable information that can be both learned, even if you just sit back and listen and do not comment on anything. It is something that is so valuable, and so I would never be in favor of lessening that because there is so much city business that takes place in one council meeting alone that to really diminish that, I think, is both a disservice to the government, but really a disservice to the residents that may be there or may be interested in attending to learn and to hear what their elected officials are both talking about and deciding on.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, we begin this question with you. Timely question. Suggest 2 changes to the city charter. If you don't have any, that's fine too, but it's...
So the city charter is currently in review. I think this is an important process. If I were to suggest 2 changes to the city charter, I think we need to clarify the mayor's veto power there. We've all seen that as a city. Another change that I would suggest to the charter is looking at the regulations for people who serve on boards and commissions. I know that recently there was an incident where someone who had been appointed to serve was told that this person was no longer able to serve because of a misinterpretation of some of the rules that were frankly unclear, but also made it seem that people couldn't serve on boards and commissions because of the very experiences that make their voices so important. So I need us to review those regulations, make them clearer, so that we can have people from all backgrounds and experiences serving our city.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone.
I think what gained the most notoriety in our city over the last year or so was exactly the mayor. Does he have the right to veto, yes or no? And that was something that came back to a charter challenge. And I think that is what is so great about having a charter review commission that is currently meeting as we head towards this charter review and this opportunity to add changes and maybe fine tune some things in the charter. We have quite a few individuals that are very knowledgeable in this regard and are able to clear that up. So I think, yes, the mayor's veto is what has been the most well-known among the community and is very pressing. But I also look to, on a larger scale, on a more overarching scale, when it comes to our charter, we do have several locations of various language. For instance, the use of the word shall in some regards has been used by different parties to mean different things. So maybe it would be something as simple as clarifying what does the word shall mean in this charter, or various language that may be somewhat ambiguous to various people as they're reading it. So to fine-tune some of that language, it's not one specific sentence perhaps, it's a more overarching initiative that needs to take place, but it's very critical when it comes to, it could touch every single piece of this charter, and it's vital that the language that is used is clear and easily understood by all parties involved.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Mr. Gardner, two changes to the charter, do you have?
Yeah, two things. Everybody's mentioned the clarifying the power of the mayor to veto an action related to one of the three charter officers: city manager, city clerk, city attorney. Depending on how you read the charter, you can point to sections that will argue either way. That's a problem. The charter needs to be definitive. That either the mayor does have veto authority in that instance, or the mayor does not have veto authority in that instance. I'm confident that the Charter Review Committee will be proposing something that will make that determination. They may even put out two options, goes either way, so the voters can pick. Another one that we actually need to deal with, and it's a little esoteric, the charter says that street trees are under the jurisdiction of the Park and Recreation Commission. In reality, they are handled by the Public Works Department. That was something we tried to square away 8 years ago. In the last charter review, the voters turned that down, I think because they didn't understand how it worked. But that's one that I think we should clarify, just so we are actually operating the way our charter reads. And by the way, shall is defined already in our charter, as is may. May is permissive, shall is a requirement.
Shall I go to you now, Ms. Edwards? Yes, Ms. Edwards, go ahead, please.
Did I just answer?
No, I'm sorry, it was too, oh, I'm sorry, it went to you? All right, tell Vicki to keep up with me here. All right. I know. So, Mr. Falcone, we've talked a lot, candidates here on our prepared questions about the north side and the plan and the vision and et cetera. Let's just say you're already there, and or let us know as we craft that vision, what, Mr. Falcone, we'll start with you, what would be your vision for the publicly owned RPU properties on the north side?
I'm going to start with a specific piece of property, and then we'll go more broad. The old golf course, which is, I think, one of the most significant pieces of land that is currently owned by RPU. The vast majority of residents that I speak to are in favor of maintaining that as open space, maintaining that as the opportunity for a walking trail type development or parcel of land. That's an example of one of the things that I would be in agreement of. I think what's also important, though, when it comes to the vision of the council person, is really the vision of the collective residents, along with the facilitation of the the council person. So I have very similar mindsets when it comes to the residents of exactly what the north side should look like moving forward. That is an area that is rooted in its unique history, an area that is rooted in having both open land for the various recreation that can take place, as well as attracting those amenities that everyday residents in other parts of the city take advantage of, perhaps. And so I think it's the balance between the two, and that is time and time again what has been heard and said by residents, and hopefully being baked into the Northside specific plan. But when it comes to RPU-owned land, I mentioned, that the old golf course and maintaining the openness of it, I think is vital moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner?
There are a number of RPU properties on the north side. The old golf course is controlled half by RPU, the water utility, the other half is controlled by the general fund. Our decision will be driven by the north side specific plan again, but there are some things that I would like to see be kept in the area as we develop the north side specific plan. I would like to see the cross-country course stay. It can be realigned a little bit here and there, but however that property is developed, whether you build something on it or it stays in open space, a cross-country course can meander through that. And if there is other development there, be it housing or retail, it's a place for the people who are there during the daytime, or people who live there, to go and walk their dogs and do a variety of things. I also would like to realign the Springbrook Arroyo, which its course was changed without benefit of permit quite some years ago. It used to meander through the golf course property. It was moved to the other side of the street, just at the end of the park here, and cuts through just a corner of the golf course. I'd like to see it meander back through.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards, what is your vision for the publicly owned RPU properties on the north side?
Well, first to clarify that my vision is just a small and one piece. As I mentioned before, I put a lot of faith in community-led processes where community members who live next to this land talk about what they want to see there, and I have participated in those processes. I have pored over the documents, looked at the sticky notes that everyone put up on visioning boards about what they want to see, and I think it's important that we do the best we can to come to consensus and incorporate as many of the ideas that came forward from the community as possible. Some ideas I've heard that I personally find particularly exciting, talking about agri-hoods and agriculture. This is a neighborhood that has historically been very rooted in agriculture, and recently the city was awarded a $3 million grant for the Sanamatsu farm to put in community gardens and to plant more trees. And so when I think about these public lands, I also think about how we can make use of this wonderful space to do more agricultural work, to train next generations of farmers here in Riverside with produce that's going back into our schools, into our restaurants. I would love to see as many trees as possible. We know that trees take a long time to grow. We need them to clean our air. They drive up property values all around it. That's a vision of mine. I also have heard how important the cross-country course is. I'd like to see that there, and dealing with drainage issues that we see in this area.
Thank you. Thank you both. This next questioner talks about, and as much of all of you have agreed upon, the concern of warehouses and traffic in the north side. But then they ask an interesting, provocative question is, we have a UC campus here in town. It's one of the great attributes we have in our community. How would you, and I'm sorry, but I believe we're starting with Mr. Gardner, I apologize. Mr. Gardner, to begin with, how would you connect the UC with the north side to create job opportunities and growth opportunities and catalytic opportunities?
I think there are a couple of ways to do that. One, it's not Northside, it's Hunter Business Park, but we already have the CSERT. It's an air quality, particularly vehicle-oriented UCR facility. It is up off Columbia Avenue. That's a good start. We have an enterprise zone that we are looking at developing in part of downtown, a little bit of the east side, and extending out to the north side. And I think there's great opportunity to work carefully with UCR on that. And you know, that I see as being a range of technology businesses, perhaps some medically oriented manufacturing, and maybe medical offices. So I think there's a lot of tie with UCR that can be done here.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, same question. UCR on the north side and all of Ward 1.
Great. I love this question about connecting to universities and tapping into the brain power of our 55,000 plus students that live around Riverside to see how we can use these ideas, these innovations to support our neighborhoods, hopefully neighborhoods that students themselves and professors themselves will want to live in. I think, speaking back to my answer for an earlier question about the potential of agriculture here and training, that is a particular expertise of UCR, and I think an easy way that we can make use of what people are studying in UCR already and bring it to this neighborhood. And I have been recently inspired, and we talk a lot about being the city of arts and innovation. I've been inspired by South Bend, Indiana, in the Midwest. They're not a city of innovation, they're a beta city, which means they're a city that's willing to try new ideas and really create this muscle of innovation. They were facing a crisis with their sewer system, and they actually went to the university and the students and the professors there to try some ideas that had come from that community to see if it would work for the city's sewer system. They ended up saving so much money and trying brand new things that had never been tried before. Now their sewer system is a leader in the nation. So we absolutely have to tap into UCR on the north side, everywhere in the city, if we do truly want to be the city of arts and innovation.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Falcone,
in
UC in Ward 1.
In December of 2017, the Riverside City Council approved an Innovation District Plan, which took a lot of the planning that was used in places like South Bend, Indiana, and other locations across the country that look at providing innovative industries into our various neighborhoods. So that's currently in the works right now in the city. I think what's important to also acknowledge, though, when it comes to moving forward with industries that we can tap into our various colleges and universities, it seems as if for a number of years we've been talking about the attraction of med tech and medical technology, and we haven't really seen many of the yields that we would like to in that regard. So something I've proposed, and something I was fortunate to work in when we were preparing this Innovation District Plan, is that we need to be looking at various anchor institutions like the California Air Resources Board, which is going, it's in Ward 2, but it's coming to Riverside shortly. Various institutions like SolarMax and other environmentally rooted agencies that can serve as anchors for other agencies and businesses that come and wish to develop here. Those are the specific fields, environmental technology, green infrastructure. These are the fields that many college students, university students are finishing their degrees in and looking to find job opportunities and cannot find it here in Riverside and go elsewhere, predominantly to Northern California. And when you have a university, I know CBU is, the percentage is 85% of their graduates leave after graduation because they cannot find the industries in which they are now experts in. And we need to do more here in Riverside in environmental technology.
Thank you, candidates. Ms. Edwards, I don't think these folks were sitting, I'm going to have two cards here. I don't think they were sitting next to each other, so let's see how we can do this. If you were elected, and this is a two-part question, if you were elected, would you dedicate all of your time to Ward 1, or would you have additional outside employment and work? And are you seeking election primarily for the money or for the citizens of Ward 1? If you want to go back over that, I know there's a lot of questions there.
No, I've got it. I'll start with the second part of this question. I have dedicated my career to service, and that is starting in front of a high school classroom, helping low-income high school students get into college, serving 2 full terms with AmeriCorps, spending over a decade in the nonprofit sector, working with youth in foster care, working at a United Way, as I mentioned, running a network of soup kitchens, food pantries, and homeless shelters. And it's that dedication to service that has inspired me to run for Riverside City Council. It's not for the money, it's for the love of the place that I have chosen to invest in and make my home. The first question was about dedicating all of my time to Ward 1. I am very proud of the fact that right now I work for a Global Women's Fund, and I love the work that I do there, and actually the work funding grassroots women's rights organizations around the world also inspires the way I think about what's happening at the local level here in Riverside. Will I need to make adjustments when I'm in the city council role to make sure that I can dedicate my time to what the residents deserve? Absolutely, and I'm prepared to do that. But I also think we benefit when our council members are thinking about places beyond Riverside and trying to apply models that they're seeing other places and a particular expertise they have.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, same question.
I would like to start with, I'm confident to say that I don't believe anyone, past or present, is running for city council for the money, because many of you know that in Riverside, at least, I can't speak for other cities, but in Riverside, at least, the council people are not doing it for the money. I think what's also important to acknowledge is that we have in Riverside somewhat pigeonholed who can both run and win and serve as a city council person. We have made it a way where many all or nothing type mentalities, and that mentality is that if you cannot run and win and serve as a city council person under these specific parameters, then you are therefore not eligible. Of course, anyone can run, but in our minds, we're thinking of the various parameters, and I think that is really a disservice to our community. We have made it where you must be a retired pension-receiving individual to run for city council in Riverside, and the reason I say it is a disservice to the larger community is because what happens is you get 7 individuals that come from very similar backgrounds. And we have had in the past council members that have both worked as well as, as a council person, as well as been active in other realms. And I think that is possible. And that does not mean at all that the residents' needs go by the wayside. It comes back to ensuring that you're electing an individual who you are confident is able to whether be multitask or do multiple things. So I think it is important to have a larger discussion of what and who we're allowing to serve on our city council.
Thank you. Mr. Gardner, I'm sure you understand the question.
I do. Let me start with the financial side. With the hours that I put in on this job, I do not make minimum wage. You do not do this for the money, nor should you. It shouldn't pay enough that a person wants the job because of how much it pays. A person should want this job because of how they can serve. I do think it is absolutely critical, particularly in Ward 1, that your representative be somebody who puts full time into this job. And I don't mean 40 hours by full time. I never put in less than 50 hours a week. My average is probably about 60, and it's not unusual to put in over 70. That's not all in the office, but it's things like coming to community meetings. We have 6 active community groups that meet monthly in Ward 1. On top of the committees that you sit on, just the whole range of things. My morning typically starts about 5 o'clock. I wake up and I start looking at the emails that came overnight and responding to those. I do whatever else is on the agenda during the course of the day, and I do emails in the evening after I get back home. Truly, if a person is not willing to commit full time to this job, they will not do it well. And they'll be frustrated. If they're good people, and we all are, they will be frustrated that they cannot do the job as well as they would like to if they don't put full time into it.
Thank you, sir. All right. I'm sorry to see. We are a charter city, and with that, we have a professional staff that's working hard, and they are trained. But I'm sorry, who's next on this question? I apologize.
I go first.
I believe it's you, Phil.
Yeah.
I apologize to the
I
audience.
believe you're up.
Mr. Falcone, would you be first to answer this? How willing are you to stand up to the city staff recommendations, learned people, when the community disagrees?
I have, as a city commissioner, I serve on the Cultural Heritage Board, as I've mentioned. I have been very vocal that when I do not believe in the staff's recommendations, I speak out and I make sure that my voice is heard. And many times that means I stand alone on a board of 9 people. I stand alone in my sentiment because I am confident in the values in which I have and the values that are expressed to me by many individuals when it comes to the historic preservation responsibilities of our board. So I would be just as confident on the Riverside City Council as I currently am as a city commissioner on the Cultural Heritage Board to whether it be standalone or to reject in a larger number staff's recommendation if it does not meet the needs of the community or the values in which I hold. And I would hope that that is something that we all look to as critical in any council person, that we are not meant to be rubber stamps. And I would hope that the residents look to that when they look to their council person. And I just say, look at my record on the Cultural Heritage Board, and you will see that I definitely am an individual that votes both my values as well as those of the community.
Mr. Gardner?
I think a council member has to be willing to take on the staff. And that's another reason I think it's important that your council member put full time into being your council member. If you aren't putting in as many hours as the staff is, you will not understand everything staff is doing. You won't read everything that the staff is preparing. You will be less prepared for meetings and votes. There are a number of instances where I have argued against a staff recommendation. I've prevailed in some, I have not in others. Many times you can begin to shape that as the staff report comes out. We are prohibited by the charter from telling any staff member what they must do or must not do. But we are allowed and encouraged to go to the city manager, or if it's something out of the city clerk or city attorney's office, them, and raise an issue, ask questions, suggest doing things a different way. That is frequently successful. Many things before they get to the council go through one of the council's policy committees, and you can deal with them there before it gets to council as well. But absolutely, if you're going to do this job well, if you're going to represent your constituency, you have to be willing to disagree with staff, and you have to be able to put together a cogent argument about why you're right and they're wrong.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards?
Throughout my career, I can say that I'm no stranger to 70-plus hour work weeks, being a mother, being now engaged in community groups, doing the reading and asking the questions that need to be asked to really understand the community issues and multiple points of view, which is something I commit to doing as well on Riverside City Council. You can be sure that I have the courage, the confidence, and also the curiosity to be on city council and ask the questions that need to be asked and to make up my mind after hearing everyone weigh in. I see residents as a partner to the council member. I see commissioners as a partner with council members and staff. I certainly have not agreed with every decision that I've seen or every briefing that I've seen come from staff. It's not the direction that I would have chosen. It's not what I've heard the residents want, but I do know that we employ excellent people in our city with expertise and a great passion for what they do. And so, yes, I will have the courage to make up my own mind after hearing all points of view. I think the staff's recommendation is an important part to pay attention to. It is just one part.
Great, thank you. This is our final question, and for some of you that got left out, some very interesting questions, but I'm going to go with this one because with prerogative. And I would like your answer, being a school board member, if you would think not just about Ward 1, but citywide. As you may know, at RUSD, we have 65% of our students, our 42,000 students, are under free and reduced lunch. Alvord is upwards to 90. So there aren't a lot of income for this, but we know that youth programs are very important. So starting with you, Mr. Gardner, if you would, what would you do to enhance youth programs in the support of city facilities, lights, fields, fees, etc., as many programs are getting expensive from one end of the city to the other?
The majority of our youth programs are in two departments. They're in the library department and park recreation and community services departments. There is some charge for some of the programs. It's not a big charge, but if you don't have enough money for your food or your shoes, even a small charge is important to you. Many of the programs have, while there is a charge, there also is a scholarship essentially available for a family that cannot afford to pay. There's a way to get their participation funded. I think it's important to maintain that. That's a mix of some city funding and some private and nonprofit funding to allow that to happen. Our library programs, by and large, have no charge at all, and I'd like to see us stay with that. We are, in general, underbuilt in parks in our city. We do not meet the state recommended number of acres of developed park property per 1,000 people. We need to continue to develop park properties. We need to continue to develop the amenities in those parks that our people want and make them available to them.
Ms. Edwards, thank you.
One of the reasons that I find running for city council to be such an extraordinary process is I get to have so many conversations with so many residents, and I will likely never forget a conversation I had with a young woman here on the north side. She opened the door and she looked me right in the eye, and she was maybe 20 years old. And she said to me, "You're running for city council? What are you going to do for the youth?" And I said, "Oh, you seem very passionate about this issue. Can you tell me more about why you're asking that question?" She said, "I've served time. I'm on probation. And I want to know, as somebody from this neighborhood, what you're going to do for the youth to make sure that other young people don't make the same mistakes I did and that they have more support than I did." That's a conversation that touched me very deeply as a human being, as a resident, as a mother. And when I'm on city council, youth is a top priority. And we need to think about how all young people can afford the opportunities in their parks around the city, looking at sliding scale. Also thinking about the way we're budgeting as a city and how we might move to priority-based budgeting that can take a look at what our priorities are, that can budget against those priorities and can make sure that these vital services against those priorities are not cut. I don't even have enough time to talk as much as I want to talk about priority-based budgeting, but I think it can help get the funding for youth we need.
Very good, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Falcone?
In my campaign, I often talk about the future of Riverside, and Riverside in the 25, 30-year outlook, the long haul. And I think when it comes to having that discussion, it's vital to acknowledge the importance of investing in our youth, investing in the young people of this town. And I think what that comes back to is, for many individuals, the parks are exactly where they grow up. The parks are where they spend their free time or where they go and play, whether it be they do not have a front yard or backyard of their own, or it is not to the scale of a park in our city. And I think that is one example of the importance of the city council advocating for the parks being a place that are both safe, secure, as well as a place that we invest monies into to ensure that those free services remain free for the various families. We also have to look at acknowledging in various areas like the North Side and others where families are facing greater challenges than perhaps in other neighborhoods across the city, and that places like Reed Park and other parks in Ward 1 and the North Side in particular have the things necessary to ensure that their services, as well as the various programs they offer through Little League and other things, are able to be attainable for all the various families and children that reside in these neighborhoods. And that's something that we have to be looking at as an investment in the future of this town.
Thank you all for your thoughtful answers there. Now we're going to go to closing statements. As Ms. Edwards began with the opening statements, Mr. Falcone will begin. Mr. Falcone and the other candidates here have 1 minute.
Mr. Gardner starts with closing
I'm sorry, he does. Well, I should have paid attention. Is that right? I'm sorry, Mr.
We
Gardner, I
can
apologize.
do it any way you would like, Mr.
I'm gonna do
Moderator.
it your way,
That's-
Mr. Gardner.
That's how we have done it in the past.
There's 3 of you and 1 of me, so if you would, and I apologize for that. Mr. Gardner, would you start with closing
I'll be happy to
statement?
begin. So, most of you know me. I've lived in Riverside since New Year's Day, 1971. I came here to continue my education at UC Riverside, graduated with a dual major in 1972. I transferred from community college, went to graduate school, met my wife while I was in school at UCR, got married, 3 kids. They all went through Riverside Public Schools. Upon my graduation, I went to work for Southern California Edison Company, and I elected to stay in Riverside. I worked in Rosemead. I elected to stay in Riverside because Riverside is Riverside. I had opportunities as I advanced in the Edison Company to move closer to work, looked at it a couple of times, and always said, no, I'm staying in Riverside. And I am still here to this day and expect to die here, although not soon. I think it is critically important that I stop because I see a red card.
That's right. Ms. Edwards, closing statement, 1 minute.
I'll go, it's fine. I'm inspired by the opportunities ahead when Riverside is a city where everyone can thrive. Throughout my career, I have brought stability and new ideas to organizations managing, as I mentioned, a multi-million-dollar portfolio for United Way, building and managing budgets, establishing organizational infrastructure, and making the most of every single penny. I would bring the same stability and different new ideas to Riverside City Council. My campaign has been endorsed by Congressman Mark Takano, Assembly Members Medina, Cervantes, the nurses of Riverside Community Hospital, workers around the region, and local Ward 1 neighborhood leaders. Together, we can address homelessness, invest in our neighborhoods, and put Riverside on the map. We will do it through courageous policy, political leadership, and the vision to do it without leaving anyone behind. I hope to earn your vote on June 4th.
Mr. Falcone, thank you, sir.
This evening, you've heard distinctly different visions for our city, and we have spoken on many of the persistent problems that have existed for many years in this neighborhood and other neighborhoods across the city. I offer, though, the fresh, forward-thinking approach and the energy and dedication to work as hard as any of our current city council members. I will partner with the county and neighboring cities to address underlying causes of homelessness. I will support developing responsibly to grow a vibrant local economy that provides high-quality jobs in a manner that preserves our city's historic character and makes the best use of available land. And finally, I will enable residents to be engaged in this community and have a sense of security and comfort in their surroundings. I ask you to join me in this vision and look forward to receiving your vote on June 4th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, let's thank our candidates for their answers and their participation tonight. Running for public office, the sprint marathon that it is, takes a lot out of a person, makes a lot of commitment for you and your family, so we appreciate all of you that you've made this commitment to be part of our city. I'd like to bring Pete back up here to talk about Ward 1 Neighborhoods United Elections Committee.
Testing. All right, we also need to give a big shout out to our moderator, Mr. Tom Hunt, who was recruited at the last minute and did a fabulous job. Thank you very much. Ward 1 Neighborhood United is a group of neighborhood alliance leaders who came together and envisioned this group of forums to try to get the candidates to the people, neighborhood by neighborhood. So this is a third of 4. We've had one for the Wood Streets, we've had one for Dana. This is the third in the north side. There's one more coming up in the Grand Neighborhood Alliance that's coming up in 2 weeks on the 24th of April. So if you, yeah, it's a long way after the election. If you didn't get your questions answered here, perhaps you could come on the 24th of April and pose those same questions there, although it'll have a distinctly different flavor than it did here in the north side. The candidates will remain for about a half an hour, so if you didn't get your question answered, because there's a lot of really great questions, you can perhaps pigeonhole them and ask your questions specifically to them and get the answers that you hopefully will deserve. The Ward 1 Neighborhood United is a grassroots organization. We did not have any support from the city or any of the other powers that be in the area to put this on. We thought it was important that the people get to hear the candidates, and it was important that we provide these forums in the various neighborhoods where actually people live. So hopefully it was a good experience for you. You can use the information received here to guide your decision on June 4th or before if you decide to mail it in early. And you will be a more educated candidate because of that. And we hope this model works. We would like to see this done throughout the rest of the city, because to tell you the truth, other wards don't do this. They don't have this kind of opportunity for the people to come out and see the candidates all together, speaking and answering the same kind of questions and hearing the different answers. So it's been a great experience. I thank you all for coming. Stay and mingle with the candidates. Be sure to visit our refreshment table, because we have lots and lots of stuff over there that we don't want to take home with us. So once again, let's give a big round of applause to the candidates. And thank you very much for coming. That's it.
I have one thing I'm supposed to say, and I don't want to get in trouble for it, so please alert your fellow voters, talk to your neighbors to this very important election. And Mr. Donahue's been over here filming. That's because shortly this film will be up on www.ward1election.com. The Riverside League of Women Voters. And again, as a resident of Riverside, and in Ward 3, I admire and commend what you in Ward 1 do. You are the founding place with the Trujillos and John W. North, and you still are the leaders of this area of our community. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you.
Hey.